Welcome, dear listener, to a world where time flows gently, where ancient stories unfold with the calm rhythm of a lullaby. As you settle in for this journey, know that these myths from the Greco-Roman world are not just tales from a distant past, but echoes that still resonate today. In the quiet hours before sleep, these myths can become a comforting embrace, guiding you toward rest and peace. So, take a deep breath, relax, and allow yourself to drift into the world of gods and heroes, where every legend holds a lesson, and every story is an invitation to pause, reflect, and unwind. Myths have been a part of human culture for millennia, woven into the fabric of every civilization. Yet, there is something uniquely captivating about the Greco-Roman myths. The ancient Greeks and Romans looked to their god for answers to life's mysteries, drawing on a vast tapestry of stories that explored everything from the creation of the universe to the lives of the gods themselves, and to the adventures of mortal heroes. These stories have survived through the ages, not merely because of their excitement or grandeur, but because they touch on universal truths and human experiences that remain just as relevant now as they were in the distant past. It is said that myths are not just the stories of old. They are also the mirrors in which we see our deepest selves reflected. The gods and goddesses of Greek and Roman mythology are not mere figures of ancient legend. They are representations of human qualities, both divine and flawed. In the tales we will explore today, you will meet gods who command the skies, shape the earth, and determine the fates of mortals. You will hear stories of great love and betrayal, of courage and fear, of wisdom and folly. These myths, though thousands of years old, speak to the core of what it means to be human. The search for meaning, the struggle against fate, the quest for power and knowledge. But tonight, as we embark on this journey through myth, the goal is not just to learn about the gods and heroes. It is to let their stories wash over you like a gentle stream. We will approach these myths not with the urgency of a lecture or the drama of a tale told at the height of its action, but with the calm, unhurried pace that mirrors the timeless flow of the stories themselves. After all, in the world of myths, time stretches out like a comforting blanket, wrapping us in its warmth. Each story we'll hear tonight is like a page in a book that you can return to again and again, each time finding something new to reflect on. The gods and mortals of Greek and Roman mythology live in a world of perfect balance, where every action has its consequence and every story flows into the next. You'll notice how many of these myths interconnect, how gods and heroes cross paths, how their fates intertwine. This web of interconnectedness is one of the most beautiful things about mythology. It is a living, breathing tapestry of stories that have been passed down from generation to generation, like whispers in the wind, meant to be shared and experienced. As we dive into these tales, think of them as an invitation to rest your mind and let the weight of the world slip away. Let the gods of ancient Greece and Rome become your companions, not as distant figures, but as gentle presences who will guide you into a state of relaxation. With every myth, you will be invited to let go of your thoughts and allow the story to gently carry you toward the shores of rest. The ancient Greeks and Romans lived in a world where myth was a central part of their daily lives. These stories weren't just for entertainment. They were ways to explain the unexplainable. They gave shape to the mysteries of life, providing answers to questions about the natural world, human nature, and the workings of fate. The myths help people make sense of their world, offering both explanations and reflections on the human experience. Take, for instance, the creation myths of the Greeks. They tell of a world born from chaos, where the gods themselves arose out of the void. In the Roman tradition, there is a similar story, though framed slightly differently. Both sets of myths, however, share common themes: the coming together of chaos and order, the birth of the gods, and the delicate balance between creation and destruction. These myths, though told through different lenses, speak to the same underlying truths that remain relevant today. Our search for understanding, our need for connection, and our desire to find peace in a world that can often feel unpredictable and chaotic. And then there are the stories of the gods themselves. The Olympians, those mighty deities who ruled over the heavens and the earth, were not simply powerful figures. They were flawed beings just like mortals. They loved, they fought, they betrayed, and they sought to make sense of their own existence in a universe that was as unpredictable for them as it was for humans. They were not perfect, and perhaps that is what makes them so relatable. We, too, are flawed, and in the gods of myth, we see reflections of our own desires, struggles, and aspirations. As we proceed through the myths, you'll hear about Zeus and Jupiter, the king of the gods, whose power and wisdom shaped the cosmos. You'll encounter Hera and Juno, the queens of the gods, whose marriages were as complicated as they were powerful. You'll journey with heroes like Hercules, whose labors were as much about inner growth as they were about physical feats. And you'll meet mortals who, in their brief lives, encountered the gods and were forever changed by their encounters. But remember, this is not a race to learn or understand all the details of these myths. Instead, let each story unfold at its own pace, like a river meandering through the landscape. Allow yourself to be enveloped by the stories, to feel their rhythms and their quiet power. This is a time not for analysis or study, but for reflection and rest. Let the stories take root in your mind, and as you listen, allow your thoughts to quieten and your body to relax. There's no need to remember every detail or track every name. Simply let the flow of the myths guide you, like a gentle breeze leading you toward slumber. In the coming stories, we will encounter love and loss, triumph and tragedy, but always with the understanding that these ancient tales hold wisdom for the present. The gods may no longer walk the earth, but their stories are eternal. They live on not only in ancient texts, but in our own hearts, in the quiet moments when we stop and reflect on the world around us. Whether we are facing challenges in our own lives or seeking understanding of our place in the world, the myths offer a kind of quiet comfort, a reminder that we are all part of something much larger than ourselves. So, as we begin our journey through these timeless stories, remember that they are not merely for learning or entertainment. They are invitations to slow down, to reflect, and to let the beauty of ancient myths soothe your mind and guide you to a place of peaceful rest. Whether you're familiar with these myths or hearing them for the first time, let them unfold gently without hurry and allow yourself to sink into the calm rhythm of their telling. Now, take another deep breath. Let your body relax, and allow the first of these ancient stories to wash over you as we begin our exploration of the world of Greco-Roman mythology. As we step deeper into the world of ancient mythology, we are invited to explore the origins of the gods themselves. Before the gods ruled, before the heroes walked upon the earth, before even the mountains and oceans took shape, there was only chaos. In both Greek and Roman mythology, this primordial state of disorder laid the foundation for all that was to come. Chaos was not a villain or a force of evil. Rather, it was a formless, empty void that existed before the birth of creation itself. It was in this boundless, shapeless expanse that the gods first emerged, bringing order to the universe and defining the natural world. Imagine, if you will, a vast emptiness, a universe that is not yet structured, with no stars, no sky, no land, only an undifferentiated mass of potential. In this infinite void, the first primordial deities began to take form. These deities were not like the gods we will meet later, gods who have personalities, desires, and intricate relationships, but rather they represented fundamental forces of nature. They were the building blocks of the cosmos, personifications of the very elements that would later shape all that exists. In Greek mythology, the first of these beings to emerge from chaos was Gaia, the earth, a solid and stable foundation from which all life would spring. She was both a goddess and the embodiment of the physical earth itself, nurturing all living things. Alongside her came Uranus, the sky, who became her consort. Together, Gaia and Uranus would give birth to the Titans, the mighty beings who would later rule the cosmos before the Olympian gods rose to power. These early deities, Gaia and Uranus, were not merely mythic figures, but representations of the eternal forces of nature, earth and sky, the foundation of existence. But the emergence of these first gods was not without its complexities. As Gaia and Uranus came together, their union was both fertile and tumultuous. Despite their connection, Uranus became fearful of the power of their children, the Titans, and sought to imprison them within the depths of the earth. This act of fear and control set into motion a series of events that would eventually lead to the overthrow of Uranus and the rise of a new generation of gods. It was the beginning of an eternal cycle, one of creation and destruction, of birth and overthrow, that would define much of mythology to come. In the Roman version of this myth, the origins of the gods are similarly tied to the forces of nature. Instead of Gaia and Uranus, the Roman myths speak of chaos, the same formless void from which emerged the primordial beings. Vesta, the goddess of the hearth, is often associated with the earth in Roman mythology, symbolizing the stability and life-giving force of the natural world. As with the Greek myths, the Romans saw their gods as personifications of natural forces, representing the very essence of the world around them. As the Greek and Roman gods began to take shape, the universe itself began to take form. The world as we know it, sky, earth, sea, emerged from the chaos of the actions of these early deities. Pontus, the personification of the sea, and Eros, the god of love, also emerged from the primordial state, bringing with them the forces of creation and destruction. The mythological narrative begins to take shape as the world moves from a state of disorder into one of organization and structure. After the first primordial gods emerged, the world was still a chaotic place. It was not yet the realm of the familiar gods and goddesses of Olympus. No gods had yet taken dominion over the elements. No heroes had been born to face great trials. Instead, it was a world in the process of becoming, a world full of potential, but one that required the shaping hand of the gods. This is where the myth of Cronus, the titan who would come to represent time and the cycle of life, comes into play. In Greek mythology, Cronus, one of the titans, eventually overthrew his father Uranus, just as Uranus had overthrown his own parents. In a mythic act of rebellion, Cronus castrated Uranus and cast him out, marking the beginning of a new era. Cronus's rise to power represents the inevitable progression of time and change, where even the most powerful beings must eventually give way to new forces. This act of violent overthrow may seem harsh, but in myth, it represents the cyclical nature of life itself. Every era gives way to the next. Cronus, now the ruler of the universe, married Rhea, and together they produced many children, including the gods who would one day rule the world. However, Cronus was deeply fearful of prophecy that foretold one of his children would overthrow him, just as he had done to Uranus. To prevent this, Cronus swallowed each of his children as soon as they were born, a desperate act to retain his power. This created a sense of tragic irony in the myths. Cronus's attempts to stop the cycle of time only ensured that it would continue. His fear and desperation would lead to his eventual downfall. The myth of Cronus's reign and eventual defeat is a crucial part of the narrative because it marks the transition from one order of gods to another. The Olympian gods, led by Zeus, will be born from the very children Cronus swallowed. This new generation of gods would eventually overthrow the Titans, creating a new pantheon of gods who would rule the cosmos from the heights of Mount Olympus. In Roman mythology, the stories surrounding the origins of the gods are similar, but with subtle differences. The Romans, who were heavily influenced by the Greeks, adopted many of the Greek gods in their myths, but they also placed their own cultural spin on them. For instance, in Roman mythology, the sky god Jupiter, the Roman equivalent of Zeus, was seen not only as a ruler of the heavens, but also as a symbol of Roman authority. His birth and rise to power were tied to the concept of Roman destiny, and the myth of his overthrow of his father, Saturn, the Roman counterpart of Cronus, mirrored the Greek story in many ways. However, the Romans also introduced their own unique myths, often emphasizing themes of duty, civic responsibility, and the rise of Rome as the greatest of all civilizations. The ancient stories of the creation of the gods and the world remind us that even in the beginning, the cosmos was a place of tension and conflict. The gods were born from the very forces they would later control, and their stories reflect the complexities of creation and destruction. These myths are not just about the rise of the gods. They are about the inevitable passage of time, the shifting of powers, and eternal dance of chaos and order. As the gods shaped the world, so too did they shape the stories that would be passed down to the ages. The origins of the gods, then, are not just a history of divine beings. They are a reflection of the eternal cycles that govern life itself. The myths remind us that, like the gods, we too are part of a larger, ever-turning wheel. The stories of creation, of overthrow and rebirth, are a testament to the fact that life is constantly in motion, always evolving, always changing. And as we listen to these stories, we are invited to reflect on our own place in this vast, interconnected world. As we move forward, the gods will take on more defined shapes and personalities. They will interact with each other and with mortals, creating myths that explore love, betrayal, wisdom, and folly. But all of these stories, at their core, are tied to primordial forces of nature, the very elements that gave birth to the gods themselves. The cycle of creation, destruction, and rebirth continues, both in the myths and in our own lives. So, as we reflect on the origins of the gods, let us carry with us the understanding that these ancient myths are more than stories. They are reminders of the deep, unchanging forces that shape our world and our lives. And, in their calm, timeless rhythm, they offer us a way to relax and find peace in the knowledge that we, too, are part of this eternal dance. As we continue our journey through the ancient myths, we find ourselves at the heart of one of the most pivotal stories in Greek and Roman mythology, the birth of Zeus in Greek mythology, or Jupiter in Roman tradition. This is not just a story of a god being born. It is a tale of the very moment when the fate of the gods and the world would change forever. It is a story of survival, power, and destiny, an unfolding of events that would lead to the rise of the greatest and most powerful of all the Olympian gods. Yet, as with many myths, the birth of Zeus/Jupiter is not a simple or straightforward event, but one fraught with danger, betrayal, and divine intervention. The story begins with Cronus, the ruler of the Titans, who had once overthrown his own father, Uranus, and taken control of the cosmos. But as often happens in myth, the cycle of power is never truly stable. Cronus had received a prophecy, one that struck fear into his heart. It foretold that one of his children would eventually rise up and overthrow him, just as he had done to his father. This prophecy filled him with dread, and to prevent it from coming true, Cronus took drastic measures. In an attempt to ensure his rule, Cronus made a decision that would echo through the ages. Every time his wife, Rhea, gave birth to a child, Cronus would swallow it whole, believing that by doing so, he could eliminate the threat to his power. One by one, the children of Cronus and Rhea were devoured. Hestia, Demeter, Hera, Hades, and Poseidon, each of them swallowed as soon as they were born, trapped forever within the belly of their father. Rhea's grief was profound, but she was powerless to stop her husband's monstrous actions. It seemed that the prophecy was destined to be fulfilled, and that Cronus's reign would continue unchallenged. However, Rhea's despair grew unbearable with each loss. When she was pregnant with her sixth child, a son, she could bear the thought of losing him to Cronus's insatiable hunger no longer. So, she devised a clever plan. As the time of her child's birth drew near, Rhea traveled to the island of Crete, seeking refuge in a hidden cave where she would give birth away from Cronus's watchful eye. There, in the safety of the cave, Rhea gave birth to a son, Zeus. To protect the newborn child, Rhea wrapped a stone in swaddling clothes and presented it to Cronus, convincing him that it was the newborn baby Zeus. Cronus, unsuspecting and eager to consume the child, swallowed the stone whole, believing it to be just another threat to his reign. Meanwhile, Zeus, the true child, was safely hidden away, far from his father's grasp. Zeus's upbringing was one of secrecy and danger. On the island of Crete, he was cared for by the nymph Adrastea and her sister Ida, who nourished him with the milk of the sacred goat Amalthea. The child Zeus grew strong and powerful, the future king of the gods. Yet all the while, Cronus continued to rule, unaware of the son he had failed to devour. Zeus's childhood was marked by a profound sense of destiny. It was clear that one day he would return to challenge his father and free his siblings from their prison within Cronus's belly. As Zeus matured, he began to hatch a plan to fulfill the prophecy. He knew that he could not defeat Cronus alone, for the Titan was a formidable opponent. To accomplish his goal, Zeus sought the help of the powerful Metis, a goddess of wisdom and cunning, who had the ability to outwit even the most powerful of beings. Metis, in her wisdom, concocted a plan that would allow Zeus to force Cronus to regurgitate his children. She gave Zeus a potion which, when mixed with wine, would compel Cronus to vomit up the children he had swallowed. Armed with this potion, Zeus set out to confront his father. One day, Zeus presented himself before Cronus, offering him wine, laced with a potion that would force him to disgorge the swallowed gods. Cronus, unaware of the plot, drank the wine, and soon after, the effects took hold. One by one, the gods who had been trapped within Cronus's stomach emerged: Hestia, Demeter, Hera, Hades, and Poseidon. Each of them regurgitated in reverse order, coming back into the world fully grown, though somewhat disoriented from their long confinement. The reunion was nothing short of miraculous, for these gods had been imprisoned within their father for so long that their very return marked the dawn of a new era. With the help of his newly freed siblings, Zeus launched a rebellion against Cronus, the titan who had once ruled the universe. This rebellion, known as the Titanomachy, would be the defining battle between the Olympians and the Titans. But before the war could truly begin, Zeus had to gather his forces. He sought the assistance of the ancient Cyclopes, who were skilled in the crafting of powerful weapons. The Cyclopes, grateful for their freedom, fashioned for Zeus the thunderbolt, a weapon of unimaginable power that would become his symbol of authority and strength. Armed with the thunderbolt, Zeus and his siblings waged war against the Titans, clashing in a cataclysmic battle for control of the heavens. The war lasted for 10 years, with neither side gaining a clear advantage. But in the end, it was the Olympians, led by Zeus, who triumphed. Cronus and the other Titans were defeated, and the Olympian gods took their place as the rulers of the universe. With the victory of the Olympians came the establishment of a new order, an order that would be defined by the power of Zeus, the king of the gods. For Zeus, the defeat of his father was not merely a personal victory. It was a fulfillment of the prophecy, the moment when his destiny was realized. But it was also a victory for the forces of order, for the overthrow of the Titans marked the beginning of a new era of stability and justice. Zeus's reign would be one of wisdom and fairness, as he would go on to rule with a sense of responsibility that would shape the world for generations to come. The birth of Zeus, then, is more than just a tale of divine birth. It is the beginning of the great struggle for control of the cosmos, a story that speaks to the cycles of power and the forces of fate. It is a story of how destiny can be thwarted, how the will to change the world can defy even the most formidable obstacles. Zeus's birth, hidden away and protected from the tyranny of his father, represents a triumph of hope over fear, of survival against overwhelming odds. In Roman mythology, the birth of Jupiter mirrors much of the Greek story of Zeus, but with distinct Roman qualities. Jupiter, like Zeus, was born of the Titan Saturn Cronus and his wife Ops Rhea. The same prophecy of a son rise and overthrow Saturn threatened the Titan king's rule, and Saturn, like his Greek counterpart, attempted to swallow his children to prevent this. Yet, like Zeus, Jupiter was saved by his mother's cunning, and later returned to free his siblings and challenge Saturn's reign. The Roman version of the myth, much like the Greek, symbolizes the rise of new order and the establishment of Roman power, with Jupiter as the emblem of Roman authority and divine protection. The birth of Zeus/Jupiter is a pivotal moment in the myths of both Greece and Rome. It marks the beginning of a new divine hierarchy, one in which the Olympian gods would reign supreme, and is a story that resonates with themes of rebellion, survival, and destiny. This tale of divine birth and overthrow is not just a myth about gods. It is a reflection of the eternal cycles of power and renewal that shape both the divine and the mortal worlds. Through Zeus's birth and the eventual triumph over his father, we are reminded of the power of fate, the strength of the will, and the resilience of hope, themes that have echoed throughout mythology and continue to inspire us today. The birth of Zeus and his siblings marked the beginning of a new era, one that would see the Olympian gods rise to power and establish their dominion over the cosmos. However, this new age was not achieved without a great struggle. The Titanomachy, or the Battle of the Gods, was the epic conflict that would determine who would reign supreme in the heavens. Zeus and the Olympians, or the Titans, led by their former king, Cronus. It was a war that would shape the world, echoing to the ages as a story of rebellion, endurance, and the eternal struggle between order and chaos. The Titanomachy did not begin as a sudden outburst of violence, but rather as a carefully plotted rebellion by the Olympians. After Zeus had freed his siblings from Cronus's belly, they were ready to confront their father. But Cronus, though weakened by his defeat, was still a mighty force. As the ruler of the Titans, he commanded immense power, and his followers were many. His sons and daughters, the Titans, were formidable beings, some of them embodying primal forces of nature, others holding dominion over key aspects of the world. They had ruled for ages and were reluctant to relinquish their power to the new generation of gods. For 10 long years, the Olympians and the Titans were locked in a brutal and unyielding war. The Olympians, though younger and less experienced, had the advantage of numbers, with Zeus leading them as the undisputed leader. However, They were also fighting against much more than just physical might. They were battling against the ancient forces of the universe itself, embodied by the Titans, who represented the primordial elements of the world: earth, sky, sea, and time. As the war raged on, the Olympians found themselves facing an uphill battle. They needed allies, beings whose strength could help them overcome the raw power of the Titans. It was during this time that Zeus sought the help of several important figures, including the Cyclopes and the Simones, two groups of primordial beings who had been imprisoned by Cronus. The Cyclopes, masters of forging powerful weapons, crafted for Zeus the Thunderbolt, a weapon of unimaginable power that would become a symbol and a key to his eventual victory. The Simones, monstrous beings with 100 hands and 50 heads, were released from their prison and joined the Olympians in the fight. With these new allies, the Olympians gained a significant advantage. The Cyclopes forged weapons not only for Zeus, but also for his brothers. Poseidon received the trident, a weapon that allowed him to control the seas, and Hades was given the helm of darkness, which rendered him invisible, giving him the ability to strike unseen. These divine weapons, forged by the hands of Cyclopes, were the gods' most powerful tools and marked the turning point in the war. The Simones, with their 100 hands, proved to be a formidable force in battle, throwing boulders at the Titans and overwhelming them with their sheer strength. The presence of these monstrous beings on the side of the Olympians instilled fear and doubt in the hearts of the Titans, who had once been the rulers of the cosmos. As the battle raged on, the tide began to turn in favor of the younger gods. One of the key moments of the war was a dramatic confrontation between Zeus and Cronus. The two mighty figures clashed in the heavens, their power shaking the very foundations of the world. Zeus, wielding his thunderbolt, fought with all his might against his father. Cronus, though older and more experienced, was overpowered by the combined strength of the Olympians, especially with the aid of his son's newfound power. The battle between father and son was not just a clash of physical might. It was symbolic of the transition from one age to another, from the old order of the Titans to the new rule of the Olympians. As the Titanomachy continued, it became clear that the Titans were not invincible. The Olympians, fueled by their determination and aided by their divine weapons, were slowly gaining the upper hand. One by one, the Titans began to fall. Some were captured, while others were defeated in combat. The Titans who fought against the Olympians were often driven by fear of losing their power, but the younger gods fought for the future, for the establishment of a new order. It was a war not just for control of the cosmos, but for the fate of the world itself. As the battle reached its climax, the remaining Titans were finally defeated. Cronus, the once mighty ruler of the universe, was overthrown and imprisoned in the deepest part of the earth, known as the Tartarus, along with many of his followers. The victory of the Olympians was complete, and Zeus, now the undisputed king of the gods, stood at the pinnacle of power. With the defeat of the Titans, a new order had been established, and the Olympian gods would reign supreme over the heavens and the earth. The aftermath of the Titanomachy marked the beginning of a new era for the gods. Zeus, now a ruler of great wisdom and strength, divided the realms of the world among his brothers. Poseidon became the ruler of the seas, Hades took control of the underworld, and Zeus himself took the throne of the sky, becoming the king of the gods. The world was divided into 3 domains, each ruled by one of the brothers, and each god dominion was carefully defined and respected. The Olympian gods now had a clear hierarchy, with Zeus at the top, followed by Poseidon and Hades, who were given equal but separate authority over their realms. The Titans, once the rulers of the cosmos, were now relegated to the depths of Tartarus, their power shattered and their reign overthrown. The Olympians, with their newfound power, sought to bring order to the world and establish their dominion over the natural forces of the universe. In Roman mythology, the story of the Titanomachy is similar, though the names of the gods and their relationships are altered to fit the Roman pantheon. Jupiter, the Roman counterpart of Zeus, led the Olympians in the battle against his father Saturn, Cronus. Just as in the Greek myth, Jupiter sought the aid of the Cyclopes, who crafted his thunderbolt, and the Simones, who helped the gods secure their victory. The Romans, however, emphasized the importance of Jupiter's role as a symbol of Roman authority, and the Titanomachy served as a metaphor for the rise of Rome as the dominant power in the ancient world. The Titanomachy is one of the most significant events in both Greek and Roman mythology, representing the cosmic struggle between the forces of order and chaos, the old and the new. It is a story of rebellion against tyranny, of the courage to challenge established power in order to bring about change. The defeat of Cronus and the Titans not only marked the rise of the Olympian gods, but also established a new divine hierarchy that would shape the mythological world for generations to come. In many ways, the Titanomachy serves as a metaphor for the cycles of history, how even the most powerful rulers must eventually give way to new generations, and how the forces of change are often met with resistance. Yet, despite the initial struggles and the fear of the unknown, change always comes, and with it, a new order is established. This timeless theme resonates deeply, as it reflects the inevitable passage of time and continual evolution of both the divine and the mortal worlds. The Titanomachy, in all its mythic grandeur, remains a story of the triumph of hope, courage, and the pursuit of a just order, a theme that will echo throughout the myths of Greece and Rome for centuries to come. After the great struggle of the Titanomachy, a new era began. Zeus, victorious and unchallenged, stood at the pinnacle of power. With the defeat of his father Cronus and the fall of the Titans, Zeus had secured his place as the ruler of the sky, the leader of the gods, and the ultimate arbiter of fate. But the road to his ultimate ascendancy was not without its complexities. As powerful as Zeus was, his reign would not simply be handed to him. It would require wisdom, strength, and often the will to face challenges from both divine and mortal realms. This is a story of how Zeus consolidated his rule, overcame rivals, and established himself as the supreme god of the Olympian pantheon. The first task Zeus faced after the war was dividing the world. After the defeat of the Titans, the cosmos lay divided, and Zeus knew that in order to maintain order, it was essential to establish clear dominions among his siblings. With Poseidon and Hades, he agreed upon a division of the realms that would define the structure of the universe. Poseidon, his brother, was given dominion over the seas and oceans, where he wielded the mighty trident, a symbol of his power to control the waters. The sea god, as he was often called, became known for his volatile nature, much like the very oceans he ruled, capable of both calm and storm. Hades, the third brother, was given control of the underworld, the realm of the dead. There, he ruled over the souls of those who had passed on, ensuring that the dead remained in their place, neither rising to the earth nor escaping into the heavens. Finally, Zeus took the skies for himself, becoming the king of the gods, ruler of the heavens and all that existed above. However, Zeus's newfound power did not come without its share of challenges. His siblings, though loyal in many ways, each had their own ambitions. Poseidon, although granted the seas, was a god with a temperament as turbulent as the oceans themselves. Hades, too, was not content with his dark realm, and while he accepted his role, he would always harbor ambitions of ruling over the living, not just the dead. Thus, Zeus's reign was constantly tested, not by outright conflict, but by the delicate balance of power that had to be maintained among the gods. The first challenge Zeus faced came from within his own family. In the aftermath of the Titanomachy, it became apparent that many of the Titans had been imprisoned in the depths of Tartarus. Some of them were powerful figures in their own right, and others, such as Atlas, the Titan who bore the weight of the heavens on his shoulders, still retained significant influence. While the Olympians celebrated their victory, the imprisoned Titans plotted their escape. For Zeus, ensuring that the Titans remained imprisoned and that the new order of the Olympians was not threatened was a crucial task. Zeus's strength, however, was not just in his power to strike down his enemies, but in his ability to form alliances, manipulate fate, and use his wisdom to maintain balance. One of the most pivotal moments in securing his reign came when he decided to take on a wife who would not only complement his power, but also strengthen his position as the ruler of the gods. This would come in the form of Hera, his sister, who, in many ways, symbolized a balance between divine authority and domestic peace. Hera, goddess of marriage and family, was a powerful and proud goddess. Her marriage to Zeus solidified their joint rule over the heavens, but it was not without its complications. The two gods often found themselves at odds, and Hera's jealousy and pride frequently led to conflicts between them. Nevertheless, Hera's role as queen of the gods gave Zeus a powerful partner who could help him maintain order on both a divine and mortal level. While Hera's wrath could be terrible, her wisdom also proved invaluable, especially in matters relating to the governance of the gods. Zeus, ever wise in his dealings, also understood that the other gods must be appeased. The gods, each with their own domains and desires, needed to be reminded of their roles within the grand order of things. This was not a world where one god could dominate, for even Zeus knew that power, when unchecked, could lead to chaos. So he worked with the gods, providing them with what they needed to fulfill their respective duties. Athena, the goddess of wisdom and war, became a close ally of Zeus. Born fully grown from his head after he swallowed her mother, Metis, the goddess of wisdom, Athena symbolized not just intellectual might, but the strategic planning needed to ensure the future success of the gods. She was the embodiment of reason, and was instrumental in advising Zeus on matters of warfare and diplomacy. Athena's wisdom helped Zeus in his decision-making, especially during times of conflict, and she became his trusted confidant and counselor. Another important figure in Zeus's rise was Apollo, the god of the sun, music, and prophecy. Apollo, born of Zeus in the Titanus Leto, was one of the most important Olympians. His role in guiding mortals with the gift of prophecy helped establish Zeus as not just a figure of power, but of destiny. Apollo's temples, like the famous one at Delphi, became places where people could seek guidance from the gods, further solidifying Zeus's authority as a divine ruler of both gods and men. But Zeus's reign was not just defined by the gods themselves. The mortal world, with all its complexities, also required careful attention. The gods, though mighty, were intricately connected to human affairs. Mortals sought to favor the gods, whether in battle, in love, or in their everyday lives. Zeus's role as the supreme god involved ensuring that the balance between gods and mortals was maintained. One of the most striking features of Zeus's reign was his ability to control fate. As the god of the sky, Zeus was not only the ruler of weather and storms, but he also held dominion over the fates of mortals. The Fates, three sisters who controlled the destinies of all living beings, were a powerful force, but even they were sometimes subject to Zeus's will. In moments of great need, Zeus could influence or alter the fates of mortals, guiding them towards certain outcomes. This power made him not only the king of the gods, but also the ultimate ruler of the universe's destiny. Despite his immense power, Zeus was not a god without his flaws. He was often portrayed as a figure torn between his divine duties and his desires. His numerous affairs with mortal women and goddesses were infamous, leading to a series of complicated relationships and often leading to Hera's jealousy. Despite these personal struggles, Zeus remained a central figure in the mythology of both Greece and Rome, embodying the qualities of both a just ruler and a passionate, sometimes flawed god. The rise of Zeus, then, is not simply the story of a god who defeated his father and claimed his throne. It is a tale of a leader who consolidated power not just through force, but through alliances, wisdom, and strategic thinking. His reign would go on to shape the very fabric of the world, defining the relationships between gods and mortals, shaping the destinies of countless lives, and embodying the balance between strength and wisdom. In Roman mythology, Jupiter, the counterpart to Zeus, played a similar role in consolidating power. As king of the gods, Jupiter's rule extended over both divine and mortal realms, and like Zeus, his influence was felt in every aspect of life, from warfare to peace, from justice to prophecy. Jupiter, like Zeus, was a god who exemplified both the potential for wisdom and the pitfalls of power, often grappling with the same struggles and challenges that defined Zeus's reign in Greek mythology. The rise of Zeus, in both Greek and Roman traditions, is a story of transformation, of a god who rises from rebellion to ultimate sovereignty. His reign, though marked by great power, was also tempered by the wisdom required to maintain peace and balance in a world full of conflict. As the king of the gods, Zeus not only ruled over the heavens, but also ensured the continued survival of the divine order, allowing the gods to live in harmony and directing the fates of mortals with a steady, guiding hand. As Zeus ascended to his role as the undisputed king of the gods, his reign was not solely defined by individual power or the dominance of his thunderbolt. It was a reign that involved constant negotiation, diplomacy, and collaboration with other powerful deities. Unlike the tyrannical rule of his father Cronus, who had ruled the Titans with a firm hand and little concern for others, Zeus sought to create a new order that was more democratic, one in which the gods would function together in a council of equals, with him at the helm. The Olympian Council became the central body of governance in the divine world, where decisions affecting both gods and mortals were made. This council was made up of the 12 principal deities of Mount Olympus, and while Zeus was their leader, he was not a king who ruled with an iron fist. Instead, he sought to balance the divine will of the god with the needs of the mortal realm, taking into account the desires, temperaments, and strengths of those who shared his authority. It was a model of governance that sought unity, but also one where power was shared among powerful individuals, each with their own domain and influence. The key members of the Olympian Council were drawn from Zeus's closest allies and family members. Hera, Zeus's wife and sister, was not just the queen of the gods, but also the goddess of marriage, family, and childbirth. Her wisdom and protective nature made her an essential member of the council, particularly when matters concerning the sanctity of marriage or the well-being of mortals were in question. Despite her often tumultuous relationship with Zeus, her influence was undeniably important, and her counsel was highly valued. Poseidon, Zeus's brother and god of the sea, was another crucial figure in the council. His temper was as turbulent as the oceans he ruled, but his strength and power were unmatched. Poseidon's role in the council was often associated with decisions related to the seas, oceans, and the natural world. While his passions could at times lead to conflict, especially with Zeus himself, Poseidon's input was vital when it came to matters involving the watery realms and the forces of nature. Hades, the third brother, was the god of the underworld. Though often viewed as a dark and mysterious figure, his place on the council was essential for understanding the balance of life and death. Hades ruled over the souls of the dead, ensuring that the dead remained in their place. He also had a unique perspective on the world, as he saw it from below the Earth's surface. His wisdom and insight into the afterlife provided valuable guidance on matters of death, fate, and the unseen realms. Demeter, the goddess of agriculture, was another key member of the Olympian Council. Her domain over the harvest, fertility, and the cycle of seasons made her one of the most important deities in the pantheon. The well-being of the mortal world, particularly in terms of food production and the survival of life on Earth, depended heavily on her decisions. Demeter was particularly involved in matters that concerned the fertility of the earth and the seasons, ensuring that the natural world was kept in balance. Apollo, the god of prophecy, the sun, and the arts, was also an essential member of the council. His ability to foretell the future through his sacred oracle at Delphi was invaluable to Zeus and the other gods. As a god of light and knowledge, Apollo brought insight into the unseen, allowing the gods to make more informed decisions, particularly in times of war or great uncertainty. Apollo's wisdom and connection to the divine truths made him an advisor whose counsel was often sought when the gods needed to understand the will of the fates. Artemis, Apollo's twin sister and the goddess of the hunt, wild animals, and the moon, played a more reserved role in the council. As a protector of nature and chastity, her influence was important when dealing with matters concerning the wild, hunting, and the preservation of the natural world. Artemis was a fierce protector of her independence, and though she was not as politically involved as some of the other gods, her presence was always felt in matters related to nature and the wilderness. Athena, born from Zeus's head, was a goddess of wisdom, warfare, and strategy. Athena's intellect and pragmatic approach made her one of the most trusted advisors in the Olympian Council. Unlike the more impulsive gods, Athena offered a voice of reason and planning, especially in times of conflict or when strategic decisions were required. Her role in warfare and her calm, measured demeanor made her the perfect advisor to Zeus, particularly when dealing with the affairs of mortals. Ares, the god of war, was often a contentious figure in the council. Unlike Athena, Ares represented the chaotic and violent aspect of war, destruction, bloodshed, and conquest. His presence in the council was essential when the gods deliberated on matters of battle and conflict, though his often rash and aggressive nature meant that his advice was not always heeded. However, Ares' role was pivotal in maintaining the balance between the forces of war and peace, even if his actions were sometimes divisive. Hermes, the messenger god, was also a member of the Olympian Council. Known for his wit, cunning, and speed, Hermes acted as the intermediary between the gods and mortals. He carried messages from Zeus to the other gods, and also helped guide souls to the underworld. As the god of travelers, trade, and thieves, Hermes' role was often facilitate communication and ensure that messages, both divine and mortal, were delivered swiftly and efficiently. His cleverness and resourcefulness made him an indispensable figure in the council, especially in matters of diplomacy and negotiation. Hestia, the goddess of the hearth and home, represented warmth, stability, and domestic order. While Hestia was not as politically involved as some of her siblings, her role in the council was symbolic. She embodied the sanctity of the family and the hearth, representing the foundation of life itself. Her presence reminded the gods of the importance of harmony, unity, and peace in both the divine and mortal realms. Hestia's calm and nurturing nature often served as a counterbalance to the more fiery and aggressive gods. Hephaestus, the god of fire and metalworking, completed the council with his mastery over the forge. As the blacksmith of the gods, Hephaestus was responsible for crafting the divine weapons that the gods used in battle, including Zeus's thunderbolt, Poseidon's trident, and Hades' helmet. His skill and artistry were crucial in maintaining the power dynamics among the gods. Hephaestus' work ensured that the gods had the tools they needed to protect themselves and enforce the order that Zeus had established. The Olympian Council was not without its tensions. The gods, despite their shared purpose, each had their own desires and ambitions. Poseidon often clashed with Zeus over the distribution of power, while Hera's jealousy could sometimes create discord, especially when Zeus took lovers or fathered children with mortals. However, the council served as a place where the gods had come together to debate, decide, and maintain the balance of the world. Zeus, as their leader, was often the mediator, ensuring that peace was kept among the gods, even when personal passions threatened to disrupt harmony. The Olympian Council, under Zeus's leadership, not only governed the divine realm, but also shaped the destiny of mortals. Many of the great myths that have come down through history, stories of heroism, love, betrayal, and tragedy, were shaped by the decisions made in this council. The gods, acting together, brought their influence to bear on the mortal world, creating a complex web of divine intervention that impacted every aspect of human life. Thus, while Zeus was the king of the gods, his rule was far from absolute. The Olympian Council was a collective body where decisions were made with input from all the principal gods. Zeus's ability to maintain balance, negotiate power, and ensure cooperation among his fellow gods was the key to his success. The Olympian Council, then, was not only a place of governance, but also a symbol of the cooperation, compromise, and shared responsibility that underpinned the order of the divine world. One of the most defining aspects of Zeus's character, and indeed one of the most talked about in Greek mythology, was a seemingly insatiable desire for love and adventure. As the king of the gods, ruler of the heavens, and master of fate, Zeus's passions often led him into numerous affairs with both goddesses and mortal women. These relationships, many of which were not always consensual, had profound impacts on both the divine and mortal worlds, leading to the birth of some of the most significant and powerful figures in mythology. Zeus's love life is a complex tapestry of passion, manipulation, deceit, and, at times, divine intervention. His affairs were not just simple acts of infidelity, but rather key moments that shaped the destinies of entire civilizations, created new heroes, and determined the future of the gods. These relationships, though often tumultuous and controversial, were central to Zeus's reign and his role as a god of destiny, power, and transformation. One of Zeus's earliest and most famous affairs was with Leda, the queen of Sparta. Leda was married to King Tyndareus, but her beauty caught the attention of Zeus, who, in the form of a swan, seduced or, in some versions, raped her. From this union, Leda bore 2 eggs, one containing the twins Castor and Pollux, and the other containing Helen and Clytemnestra. Helen, the most beautiful woman in the world, would later become the catalyst for the Trojan War, while Castor and Pollux, known as the Dioscuri, would be renowned as great heroes of Greek mythology. This affair with Leda, then, had far-reaching consequences, as it was the origin of one of the most famous and tragic wars in mythological history. Another infamous affair of Zeus involved Europa, a Phoenician princess. According to the myth, Zeus fell in love with Europa and, in order to approach her without alarming her, transformed himself into a majestic white bull. Europa, intrigued by the beautiful creature, climbed onto his back, and the bull, Zeus, then swam across the seas to the island of Crete. Once there, Zeus revealed his true form and seduced Europa, who would later give birth to Minos, the future king of Crete, and Rhodes. Europa's story is one of the many in which Zeus's shape-shifting abilities played a crucial role in his pursuit of mortal women. His ability to change form allowed him to deceive and manipulate, often with disastrous results for the women involved. Zeus's affair with Io, a beautiful mortal priestess, is another tragic tale. Io was a priestess of Hera, Zeus's wife, and caught the god's eye. In order to hide his infidelity from Hera, Zeus transformed Io into a heifer, but Hera, suspicious of her husband's behavior, soon discovered the deception. Hera demanded the heifer, and Zeus was powerless to refuse. Io, trapped in her animal form, wandered the earth in search of freedom, eventually reaching Egypt, where she was transformed back into her human form and gave birth to Epiphas, a future king of Egypt. The myth of Io is one of betrayal, divine punishment, and the consequences of Zeus's actions. It also shows a recurring theme in Greek mythology of transformation as a means of both escape and punishment. Zeus's affairs were not limited to mortal women alone. Many of his lovers were goddesses. One of his most significant and fateful relationships was with Demeter, the goddess of agriculture and the harvest. Though the exact details of their union vary across different versions of the myth, it is often told that their affair resulted in the birth of Persephone, a central figure in the myth of the seasons. Persephone would later be abducted by Hades, becoming the queen of the underworld. Demeter's sorrow at her daughter's abduction caused the seasons to halt, leading to famine on earth. This myth, rooted in the divine relationships among the gods, reflects the interconnectedness of love, loss, and the cycles of nature. Zeus's involvement in the birth of Persephone underscores his influence not only over the heavens, but also over the mortal world and its natural order. Zeus's relationship with Semele, a mortal princess, was another example of his far-reaching influence. Semele was the daughter of Cadmus, the founder of Thebes, and she captured Zeus's heart. Hera, ever suspicious of Zeus's infidelities, devised a plan to destroy Semele. Disguising herself as an old woman, Hera convinced Semele to ask Zeus to reveal his true divine form. Unable to refuse a mortal's request, Zeus revealed himself in his full glory, causing Semele to be consumed by the divine fire. However, before she perished, Semele was pregnant with Dionysus, the god of wine and ecstasy. In a twist of fate, Zeus rescued the unborn child from Semele's womb, stitching him into his own thigh until the child was ready to be born. Dionysus would grow to be one of the most important and influential gods in the Greek pantheon, embodying the themes of life, death, and rebirth, and his birth was a result of Zeus's tragic yet transformative love affair with Semele. In addition to these more famous affairs, Zeus had countless other lovers, both mortal and divine. His relationships often led to the birth of heroes and demigods, many of whom played pivotal roles in Greek mythology. For example, Hercules, perhaps the greatest of Greek heroes, was the son of Zeus and the mortal Alcmene. Hercules' 12 labors, his struggles with the gods, and his ultimate ascension to Olympus are among the most famous myths in Greek lore, and all of it stemmed from Zeus's union with Alcmene. Zeus's love affairs, however, were not without consequences, particularly in his relationship with Hera, his wife and sister. Hera's jealousy and anger were legendary, and she would often seek revenge on the women who bore Zeus's children, as well as on the children themselves. For instance, Hercules, the son of Zeus and Alcmene, was one of Hera's primary targets. Hera's hatred for Hercules was so intense that she made his life incredibly difficult, even attempting to kill him as an infant by sending 2 serpents to his cradle. Yet, despite Hera's constant interference, Hercules would go on to complete his 12 labors and achieve immortality, a testament to his divine parentage and Zeus's enduring influence. The tension between Zeus and Hera over his infidelities was a constant theme in their relationship. Hera, though a powerful and wise goddess, was often portrayed as vengeful and wrathful, especially when it came to Zeus's amorous exploits. However, despite their constant quarrels, Zeus and Hera remain a central couple in Greek mythology, representing the dynamics of marriage, power, and the complexities of family. Zeus's many lovers and his resulting progeny were essential to the creation of mythological heroes and the continuation of divine bloodlines. The heroes born from his relationships with mortal women bridged the gap between gods and humans, embodying both divine strength and mortal vulnerability. These heroes were often called upon by the gods to perform great tasks, to battle monsters, or to uphold divine law. Zeus's lovers, while often victims of his power and desire, were also pivotal in the shaping of the mythological world. In Roman mythology, Zeus's counterpart Jupiter had similar traits when it came to his relationships. Jupiter, like Zeus, was known for his numerous affairs with both mortal women and goddesses, leading to the birth of a host of important figures in Roman myth. His relationships mirrored those of Zeus, with the same divine transformations, manipulations, and tragic consequences. Jupiter's love life, much like Zeus's, was a central theme in Roman mythology, reflecting the complexities of divine power and the influence of the gods over the mortal world. Ultimately, Zeus's many loves serve as a reminder of the complexity of divine authority and the tensions that arise when gods interact with mortals. His affairs shape the destinies of both gods and mortals alike, leading to the birth of heroes, the beginning of wars, and fulfillment of prophecies. Through his relationships, Zeus remained a god of transformation, transforming both himself and the world around him, shaping the very course of history with his passions and actions. While Zeus had established himself as the supreme ruler of the heavens, his reign was far from peaceful. The Olympian gods, while united in their victory over the Titans, were not immune to conflict. As the god of thunder and king of the gods, Zeus was constantly faced with challenges, both from his fellow deities and from external forces. The Olympian gods, each with their own unique powers, personalities, and domains, frequently clashed over issues of power, control, and ambition. Though the Titanomachy had brought a temporary peace to the world, the Olympians were no strangers to war. These divine wars, though often occurring in the heavens, had far-reaching consequences on the mortal realm, shaping the destinies of both gods and humans. The most famous of the Olympian wars was the Gigantomachy, the war between the Olympians and the giants, a race of primordial beings born from Gaia, the earth. The giants were angry at the Olympians for their rule over the cosmos and sought to overthrow them. Led by their most powerful leader, Alcyoneus, the giants waged a fierce war against the gods, hoping to dethrone Zeus and his siblings. The conflict was one of massive proportions, as the gods fought against these monstrous beings, each possessing immense strength and power. In the Gigantomachy, Zeus's leadership was put to the test as he guided his siblings in battle. Despite their immense strength and divine weaponry, the Olympians found themselves in a fierce struggle against the giants, whose powers were bolstered by their connection to the earth. The giants were not merely strong, they were also immune to the gods' most powerful weapons. For a time, the gods struggled to gain the upper hand. It was only with the help of Hercules, the greatest of all mortal heroes, that the Olympians finally emerged victorious. Hercules, aided by the gods, fought alongside them in the battle, and through his courage and strength, he was able to defeat the giants and ensure that they would never again challenge the Olympians. The Gigantomachy is often seen as a reflection of the struggle for dominance between different cosmic forces, between the primordial powers of the earth and the new order of the Olympians. The giants, born from Gaia, symbolized the primal forces of nature, while the Olympians represented the divine order that had replaced the chaos of the Titans. The war between the two sides was not just a battle of physical might, but also a struggle for the future of the cosmos. Another significant conflict within the Olympian realm occurred during the Titanomachy, the great war between the Titans and the Olympians. Although this battle has already been mentioned as the war that led to Zeus's rise to power, it is important to note that the Titans were not the only adversaries the Olympians would face. Over the course of Zeus's reign, other gods and powerful beings would challenge the Olympians in an attempt to claim the throne or overthrow their rule. One such conflict involved the Titaness Themis, the goddess of divine law and order. Themis was a close ally of Zeus, and for a time, she advised him in matters concerning justice and the natural order. However, as the other god began to assert their power, Themis herself was drawn into a bitter dispute with Zeus over the administration of justice. Themis, though a goddess of law, believed that the rule of law should not be entirely in the hands of any one deity, even if that deity was Zeus. She argued that justice should be equally distributed among the gods, and that the Olympian Council should have more say in matters concerning the cosmos. This disagreement, though not leading to a full-blown war, did create tensions within the Olympian court and spark debates over how the heavens should be governed. Similarly, the Titaness Rhea, the mother of Zeus and the other Olympian gods, also played a complex role in the power struggles among the Olympians. Though she had supported her son's rise to power, Rhea had also once been a part of the older order, that of the Titans. Her relationship with Zeus, who had overthrown her own generation of gods, was a complicated one. At times, Rhea acted as an advisor to Zeus, offering him counsel, but there were moments when she expressed dissatisfaction with the way he ruled, particularly when it came to his treatment of his siblings and his insistence on maintaining absolute power. While Rhea never directly opposed Zeus, her occasional ambivalence toward his reign was indicative of the wider tensions that existed among the gods, even within the Olympian family. One of the most famous wars in which Zeus found himself involved was the Titanomachy's aftermath, and the war against the Typhon. Typhon, the most fearsome and destructive monster ever to exist in Greek mythology, emerged from Gaia as a result of her anger toward the Olympians. Typhon was described as a terrifying being, with 100 dragon heads, each spewing fire and venom. He was an embodiment of chaos, destruction, and the forces of nature that the Olympians had fought to conquer in the Titanomachy. When Typhon attacked Mount Olympus, he sought to overthrow Zeus and take control of the heavens. Typhon's assault on the Olympians was devastating, and the gods, once victorious in the Titanomachy, were now forced to retreat before the monstrous power of Typhon. Zeus, however, was not easily defeated. He fought Typhon in a battle that lasted for days, with thunderbolts crackling across the skies as the two powers clashed. In the end, Zeus was able to defeat Typhon with his thunderbolts, trapping him under Mount Etna, where Typhon would remain imprisoned for eternity. The battle with Typhon is significant not only because it demonstrated Zeus's power over chaos and destruction, but also because it marked a reaffirmation of the Olympians' dominance over the forces of nature. These divine wars, whether against the giants, the titans, or monstrous beings like Typhon, shaped the mythological landscape of ancient Greece. Each conflict represented a different aspect of the Olympians' struggle to maintain their power and assert their authority over the cosmos. The Olympians were not simply passive gods who ruled over a stable and harmonious world. They were active participants in a never-ending struggle to preserve their order and prevent chaos from engulfing the world. The wars of the gods also had profound effects on the mortal realm. The battles between the Olympians and their enemies were not confined to the heavens, but spilled over into the world of humans. For example, the Gigantomachy was said to have been fought in the land of mortals, and the fallout from these divine wars often had consequences for the human world. Heroes were born, cities were destroyed, and the gods' interference in mortal affairs shaped the course of human history. In this way, the Olympian wars were not just about divine politics or power struggles. They were about the very fabric of the world itself. Zeus's role in these conflicts was central to the mythological narrative of Greek culture. As the god of thunder and king of the gods, his leadership, wisdom, and power were indispensable in overcoming the forces that threatened the Olympian order. Yet, even Zeus was not infallible. He faced challenges from his own family, other gods, and the very forces of nature that the Olympians had once sought to control. His ability to navigate these conflicts and ultimately triumph over chaos solidified his position as the ruler of the cosmos and protector of divine order. In Roman mythology, these same wars were often mirrored in the stories of Jupiter, the counterpart to Zeus. Jupiter, like Zeus, faced challenges from both other gods and monstrous beings, reaffirming his status as the king of the gods. The wars of the Olympians, both in Greek and Roman mythologies, serve as timeless symbols of the ongoing struggle between order and chaos, power and rebellion. The gods, through their wars and conflicts, shaped the world and influenced the fate of humanity, ensuring that the balance between the divine and the mortal remains forever in flux. Thus, the Olympian wars are more than just battles for power. They are emblematic of the constant tension in the universe, the never-ending battle for dominance, and the delicate balance that must be maintained to ensure that the gods and mortals alike can coexist in harmony. Zeus, as the king of the gods, was not only the ruler of the heavens, but also a central figure in the lives of mortals, often intervening in their fates to bring about the birth of great heroes and demigods. His numerous affairs with both goddesses and mortal women resulted in the birth of powerful offspring who would go on to become legendary figures in Greek mythology. These heroes, born of both divine and mortal parentage, were pivotal in shaping the fate of humanity and the gods, often becoming the instruments through which the gods' wills were fulfilled. The children of Zeus, known as demigods, were often caught between two worlds, the divine and the mortal. They were born with extraordinary abilities granted by their divine parent, but were also subject to the trials and tribulations of mortal life. Their lives were often filled with great feats, dangerous quests, and tragic fates, making them some of the most beloved and tragic figures in Greek mythology. These heroes embodied the virtues and flaws of both the gods and humans, and their stories often reflected the complexities of divine intervention and the nature of fate. One of the most famous of Zeus's demigod children was Hercules, known to the Romans as Hercules. Hercules' birth is a story marked by both divine love and mortal strife. Zeus's affair with Alcmene, a mortal princess, led to the birth of Hercules, who was destined for greatness. However, Hera, Zeus's wife, was consumed by jealousy and anger at Zeus's infidelity and sought to punish Hercules. She made his life miserable from the moment he was born, even sending 2 serpents to his crib in an attempt to kill him. Despite this, Hercules' strength and divine heritage enabled him to survive the attempt on his life, and he would go on to complete the 12 labors, one of the most famous cycles of heroic feats in mythology. The 12 labors were a series of seemingly impossible tasks that Hercules had to complete as a form of penance for a crime he committed under the influence of Hera. These labors included slaying the Nemean lion, capturing the Ceryneian hind, and stealing the golden apples of the Hesperides. Each labor tested Hercules' strength, cunning, and perseverance, and his success in completing them not only solidified his status as a hero, but also demonstrated the divine nature of his power. Yet, despite his godlike abilities, Hercules' life was also marked by tremendous suffering, and he ultimately died a mortal death. His journey exemplified the theme of the demigod's tragic fate, born of divine lineage, but ultimately doomed to face mortal hardships. Another of Zeus's famous mortal children was Perseus, the son of Zeus and the mortal Danae. Perseus' birth was surrounded by tragedy, as Danae's father, Acrisius, king of Argos, had received a prophecy that his grandson would kill him. In an attempt to prevent this fate, Acrisius locked his daughter in a bronze chamber. However, Zeus, captivated by Danae's beauty, visited her in the form of golden rain, and from their union, Perseus was conceived. When Perseus was born, Acrisius, fearing the prophecy, cast Danae and her son adrift at sea in a wooden chest. They eventually washed ashore on the island of Seriphos, where Perseus was raised by the king Polydectes. Perseus' life was filled with heroic feats, the most famous of which was his quest to slay the monster Medusa, one of the 3 Gorgons. With the help of gifts from the gods, such as Hermes' winged sandals and Athena's shield, Perseus was able to behead Medusa and use her head as a powerful weapon. Perseus' victory over Medusa was symbolic of the demigod's ability to overcome monstrous forces and divine obstacles. Like Heracles, Perseus' story illustrates the recurring theme of a hero born of both mortal and divine parentage who must face extraordinary challenges. Perseus' later adventures included rescuing Andromeda, a princess who was chained to a rock as a sacrifice to a sea monster. After rescuing her, he married her, and their union would lead to the birth of many children, cementing Perseus' legacy. Perseus, like many demigods, faced a conflict between his divine nature and mortal limitations, but he was ultimately able to fulfill his heroic destiny, even if it was steeped in tragedy. Another notable child of Zeus was Theseus, the legendary king of Athens. Theseus' birth was similarly influenced by divine intervention. His mother, Hera, was a mortal woman, but Zeus, moved by love or desire, visited her in her sleep and caused her to conceive Theseus. Theseus is most famous for his role in slaying the Minotaur, a monstrous creature that resided in the labyrinth of Crete. The Minotaur, half man and half bull, was a source of terror for the people of Athens, who were forced to send 7 young men and 7 young women to Crete every year as tribute. Theseus volunteered to be one of the tributes, determined to end the Minotaur's reign of terror. With the help of Ariadne, the daughter of King Minos of Crete, Theseus was able to navigate the labyrinth and kill the Minotaur. His victory was a triumph of courage and intelligence, and his success further cemented the idea of the demigod as a hero capable of overcoming seemingly insurmountable challenges. Theseus's life was filled with many other heroic deeds, including founding the city of Athens and uniting the warring tribes of the region. However, like many heroes, his story was also marked by tragedy and personal flaws, including his role in the death of his own father, Aegeus, and his eventual decline as a ruler. Helen of Troy, born of Zeus and the mortal Leda, is another figure whose life was profoundly shaped by her divine parentage. Helen's beauty was said to be so great that it caused the Trojan War, one of the most epic and tragic conflicts in Greek mythology. Her abduction by Paris, a prince of Troy, led to the mobilization of the Greek forces to bring her back, resulting in a 10-year siege of Troy. Helen's role in the war was controversial. Though she was a cause of the conflict, she was also a victim of fate, manipulated by the gods and forced to play a part in a much larger cosmic struggle. Her story reflects the idea that, despite their divine heritage, demigods are often at the mercy of the gods and their own fates. Zeus's many affairs and the offspring they produced not only shaped the mortal world, but also had significant consequences for the gods themselves. Many of Zeus's children were used by the gods to achieve their own ends, often being sent on quests or tasked with defeating monsters. The demigods were tools in the hands of the gods, but they were also agents of change, shaping the course of history through their actions. These heroes embodied both the power of the gods and the frailties of mortals, and their stories were often filled with both triumph and tragedy. In Roman mythology, the demigods and heroes of Greek myth were often given Roman counterparts. For example, Hercules became Hercules in Roman myth, and Perseus' deeds were similarly celebrated in Roman tradition. The legacy of Zeus's children transcended Greek mythology, influencing both the ancient Greeks and Romans, and continuing to inspire stories of heroism and adventure to this day. Ultimately, the heroes born of Zeus's many unions represent the dual nature of existence, the struggle between the divine and the mortal, the fleeting nature of human life, and the enduring legacy of the gods. These heroes were not merely mythological figures, but symbols of the eternal conflict between destiny and free will, between fate and choice. Through them, the stories of the gods were passed down, shaping the world and the lives of those who came after. Zeus's influence extended far beyond the realms of the gods and goddesses. His power stretched deeply into the world of mortals, where he often intervened in the lives of human beings. As the supreme deity, Zeus had the ability to shape the destinies of men and women, influencing their fates in ways that could be both benevolent and punitive. His decisions were not always easy to understand, as they were often guided by his broader sense of cosmic order, which transcended human understanding. Mortals, for better or worse, found themselves subject to the whims of Zeus, for he was a master of both fate and fortune. Zeus's interventions in mortal affairs were manifold, and he played a central role in numerous myths that concerned the lives of humans. His actions ranged from providing guidance and protection to punishing transgressions. He was known to intervene in mortal conflicts, offering aid to those he favored, while bringing down his wrath upon those who defied him or the laws of the gods. Yet, it was not just his power that shaped the mortal world, but also the intricate web of fate that Zeus presided over, which dictated how the lives of humans would unfold. One of the most famous examples of Zeus's intervention in mortal affairs is the myth of Prometheus, the titan who defied Zeus to give fire to humanity. Prometheus's act of compassion for mortals was seen as a betrayal of the gods. Zeus, in his wrath, sought to punish Prometheus for his disobedience. The punishment was severe. Prometheus was bound to a rock, where an eagle would eat his liver every day, only for it to regenerate each night, subjecting him to eternal torment. This punishment was not just a personal vengeance, but also a message to humanity about the consequences of defying the gods. However, Prometheus's gift of fire had a lasting impact on humanity, symbolizing the acquisition of knowledge and power, things that would shape the course of civilization. Zeus, while punishing Prometheus, had inadvertently set in motion the progress of human development, showcasing the complex and often paradoxical nature of his interventions. Zeus's influence over fate was also reflected in the myth of Oedipus, one of the most tragic figures in Greek mythology. Oedipus, the king of Thebes, was born to Laius and Jocasta, who were given a prophecy that their son would grow up to kill his father and marry his mother. In an attempt to avoid the prophecy, Laius ordered that Oedipus be abandoned in the wilderness to die. However, the infant Oedipus was found and raised by the king and queen of Corinth, unaware of his true parentage. Oedipus grew up and eventually fulfilled the prophecy by unknowingly killing his father and marrying his mother. This tragic series of events unfolded due to the inescapable nature of fate, which was overseen by Zeus and the Fates. Though Oedipus tried to avoid his destiny, he was powerless to alter it, and in the end, he became a symbol of the tragic consequences of trying to escape the will of the gods. Another powerful example of Zeus's role in shaping mortal fate is the myth of Achilles, the greatest of the Greek heroes in the Trojan War. Achilles was the son of Zeus and the mortal Thetis, a sea nymph. From birth, it was prophesied that Achilles would be either a great hero or die young, and this prophecy haunted both his mother and him throughout his life. Thetis, wishing to protect her son, tried to make him immortal by dipping him in the river Styx, but she was unable to make him fully invulnerable. Achilles' fate was sealed, as he became the central figure in the Trojan War. His actions, driven by both his rage and his heroic destiny, were heavily influenced by Zeus's will, as the gods played a critical role in the war. Achilles' fate, marked by his untimely death at the hands of Paris, was a tragic reminder of the power that the gods held over human lives. Zeus, despite his personal affection for Achilles, allowed his fate to unfold according to the larger forces of destiny. Zeus's involvement in the Trojan War itself was another significant example of his influence over mortal affairs. The war was instigated when Paris, a prince of Troy, judged a beauty contest between the goddesses Hera, Athena, and Aphrodite. Each goddess promised him great rewards in exchange for his favor, and Paris, seduced by Aphrodite's promise of love of the most beautiful mortal woman, Helen, chose her as the winner. This decision sparked the war between the Greeks and the Trojans, with Zeus playing a key role in steering the course of events. Though Zeus initially sought to remain neutral, he was drawn into the conflict, his decisions swaying the tides of battle. On several occasions, he directly intervened, either helping or hindering the various parties involved. Zeus's actions during the Trojan War reflected the tension between fate and free will. Though mortals fought for their honor and their gods, their destinies were ultimately determined by the will of the divine. Zeus's role in the lives of mortals also included acts of mercy and protection. For instance, in the myth of Baucis and Philemon, an elderly couple in Phrygia, Zeus and Hermes visited the couple in disguise, seeking shelter during a time when the rest of the village had turned them away. Baucis and Philemon, showing great hospitality, offered what little they had, and in gratitude, Zeus transformed their humble home into a magnificent temple. When the couple died, Zeus granted their wish to remain together forever, transforming them into intertwining trees, one an oak and the other a linden. This story of divine reward highlighted Zeus's role as a protector of hospitality and a reminder of the importance of kindness and generosity. Zeus's involvement in mortal fate also had a darker side, as he could bring down divine retribution upon those who defied the gods or violated sacred laws. The myth of Niobe, the queen of Thebes, serves as an example of Zeus's wrath. Niobe, boasting of her superiority over the goddess Leto because she had more children, angered Zeus. In retribution, he sent his children, Apollo and Artemis, to kill all of Niobe's children. The devastating loss drove Niobe to despair, and she was turned into a stone, forever weeping. This tragic myth demonstrated the consequences of hubris, excessive pride or disrespect toward the gods, and the harshness of Zeus's divine justice. One of the most famous and influential instances of Zeus's role in mortal fate was his punishment of Sisyphus, the king of Corinth. Sisyphus was known for his cunning and deceit, even tricking the gods themselves. In one of his most famous acts of defiance, Sisyphus managed to escape death by tricking Thanatos, the god of death, and preventing mortals from dying. Zeus, enraged by Sisyphus's hubris, sentenced him to an eternal punishment in the underworld. Sisyphus was condemned to roll a massive boulder up a hill, only for it to roll back down each time he neared the top. This endless struggle symbolized the futility of attempting to outwit the gods and the inescapable nature of divine punishment. Zeus's interventions in mortal affairs, whether merciful or vengeful, served to remind humans of their place in the world. While mortals were capable of great acts of courage, wisdom, and compassion, they were always at the mercy of the gods. Their lives were shaped by the will of Zeus, who, through both direct intervention and the influence of fate, guided the course of human history. Whether helping heroes like Hercules or bringing about the destruction of those who defied him, Zeus's role in mortal fate was both a force of order and a reminder of the fragile nature of human existence. Through his actions, Zeus demonstrated the delicate balance between divine intervention and mortal agency. His actions shaped the lives of mortals, and through their stories, humanity was reminded of the power of the gods and the inescapable force of fate. Ultimately, Zeus's influence over mortal fate reinforced a belief in the ancient world that the gods, particularly the king of the gods, were not distant and indifferent, but actively involved in the lives of those they ruled. Zeus, as the king of the gods, had complex and often volatile relationships with the other members of the Olympian pantheon. His role as a supreme deity meant that he was constantly navigating the delicate balance of power, authority, and influence among the gods, each of whom had their own domains, personalities, and desires. While Zeus held ultimate authority, his interactions with his siblings, children, and other deities were often marked by both cooperation and conflict. The relationships within the Olympian pantheon were not always harmonious, and Zeus's ability to maintain his rule was often tested by rivalries, power struggles, and the personal ambitions of those around him. Zeus's relationship with his siblings, particularly his brothers Poseidon and Hades, was foundational to the structure of the Olympian gods. After the defeat of the Titans, the world was divided among Zeus, Poseidon, and Hades, with each god ruling over a separate domain. Zeus took control of the heavens and the sky, Poseidon ruled the seas, and Hades governed the underworld. This division of power was crucial in maintaining order among the gods, but also created tensions. Though the three brothers were united in their victory over the Titans, their territories were not always clearly delineated, and disputes arose over matters of jurisdiction and influence. One of the most notable examples of this rivalry between the brothers occurred during the myth of Titanomachy, when Zeus was forced to battle the Titans for supremacy. The role each brother played in this conflict was significant, and their alliances and actions would have lasting consequences for their relationships. Poseidon, known for his temper and fiery nature, often felt that he was not given enough respect by his brothers. Despite his mighty rule over the seas, he was frequently frustrated by the way Zeus seemed to dominate the Olympian order. Similarly, Hades, who ruled the shadowy underworld, found himself on the fringes of the Olympian world, rarely involved in the daily affairs of the gods. Although he held immense power over the souls of the dead, Hades was often excluded from the more glamorous and public activities of the gods, which created tension and bitterness. At times, Zeus's relationship with his siblings was one of mutual respect and cooperation. For example, in the myth of the Iliad, during the Trojan War, the gods took sides in the conflict, with each deity supporting different factions. Zeus, while neutral at times, had the final say in determining the outcome of the war. He played a crucial role in deciding the fates of various heroes and intervening in mortal affairs when necessary. His decisions often angered both Poseidon and Hades, as they had their own preferences for who should emerge victorious. However, despite their disagreements, Zeus was still able to maintain his position as the supreme ruler of the gods, guiding the overall course of the war while balancing the interests of his brothers and the other gods. Zeus's relationship with Hera, his wife and sister, is one of the most complicated in Greek mythology. Hera, the goddess of marriage and family, was often at odds with her husband due to his numerous infidelities and the countless mortal women with whom he had affairs. While Zeus's love affairs were frequent and sometimes even well known, Hera's jealousy and anger were equally infamous. In some myths, Hera is depicted as plotting against Zeus's lovers and children, and her wrath could be severe. Yet, despite her jealousy, Hera remained married to Zeus, as their union symbolized the divine order and stability of the gods. One of the most well-known myths involving Hera's jealousy is the story of Hercules. Hercules was the son of Zeus and the mortal Alcmene, and from the moment of his birth, Hera harbored a deep hatred for him. She attempted to kill him as an infant by sending 2 serpents to his cradle, and throughout Hercules' life, she made his tasks and trials as difficult as possible. This rivalry between Hera and Hercules is a testament to the complexity of Zeus and Hera's marriage. While Hera's jealousy and vengeance were often destructive, Zeus's decisions, while sometimes insensitive, did not always go against his queen. Despite their frequent conflicts, the couple remained married, reflecting the tension between their individual desires and the larger role they played in maintaining divine order. Zeus's relationship with Athena, his daughter, was one of mutual respect and admiration. Athena, the goddess of wisdom, war, and strategy, was born from Zeus's head, a unique and extraordinary birth that symbolized her divine intelligence and strategic prowess. Athena was one of the few deities who could match Zeus's intellect, and they often worked together to solve problems or influence mortal affairs. In the myth of the Odyssey, for example, Athena played a key role in guiding the hero Odysseus on his journey home. She acted as protector and advisor, using her wisdom to help him navigate the trials and challenges set before him. In return, Zeus trusted Athena's judgment and often sought her counsel on matters of war and strategy. Zeus's relationship with Apollo and Artemis, his twin children by the Titaness Leto, was similarly one of respect and affection. Apollo, the god of prophecy, music, and the sun, and Artemis, the goddess of the hunt and the moon, were two of the most prominent and powerful figures in the Greek pantheon. Apollo and Artemis were often depicted as working together in their respective roles, with Apollo bringing light and knowledge, and Artemis embodying the untamed and protective aspect of nature. Zeus had great pride in his children, and he frequently supported their endeavors. For example, when Niobe boasted of her superiority to Leto, claiming to have more children, Apollo and Artemis avenged their mother by killing all of Niobe's children. In this way, Zeus's relationships with his children were not just paternal, but were also rooted in the political dynamics of the divine world. Apollo and Artemis, like Athena, were often instrumental in carrying out Zeus's will and maintaining balance among the gods. Zeus's relationship with Hermes, his son by the nymph Mai, was one of mutual admiration and trust. Hermes, the god of commerce, travelers, thieves, and messenger of the gods, was known for his cunning and swift actions. He was often seen as a mediator between the gods and mortals, a role that Zeus valued greatly. Hermes was the only god who could travel freely between the realms of the gods and the underworld, making him an essential figure in Zeus's plans. In many myths, Hermes acted as a messenger, delivering Zeus's will to both gods and mortals alike. His wit and resourcefulness made him a valuable ally to Zeus, and the two shared a close bond. Hermes' quick thinking and ability to resolve conflicts were essential to maintaining the balance of power within the divine world. The relationships within the Olympian pantheon were complex, as each god had their own interests and domains, but they were all bound together by Zeus's leadership. Despite his occasional infidelities, his alliances with other gods were critical in maintaining his position as the king of the gods. Zeus's power was not just derived from his own strength, but also from his ability to manage the personalities and ambitions of the other gods. He was able to navigate conflicts, broker peace, and maintain a semblance of order, ensuring that the gods worked together for the greater good. However, Zeus's rule was not without its challenges. The gods, much like mortals, were driven by ambition, pride, and a desire for control. While Zeus often maintained a sense of balance, he had to continuously navigate these complex relationships, managing rivalries, jealousy, and disputes among his fellow gods. The pantheon was a constantly shifting network of alliances and conflicts, and Zeus's ability to manage these relationships was a key factor in his ability to maintain his rule. In the end, Zeus's relationships with the other gods in the pantheon exemplified both the strengths and flaws of divine rule. His power was absolute, but his interactions with his fellow deities reflected the intricacies of managing a divine family. Whether through cooperation or conflict, Zeus's leadership was integral to the functioning of the Olympian world, and his relationships with the other gods were central to his reign. His ability to maintain his position, even amidst the rivalries and ambitions of the other gods, cemented his place as the supreme deity in Greek mythology. Zeus, as the supreme ruler of the gods, was not only a deity of power and authority, but also one deeply associated with justice and order. As the god of the sky and thunder, he wielded the thunderbolt as his most potent weapon, a symbol of his ability to enforce divine laws and mete out justice. In Greek mythology, Zeus was often portrayed as a protector of both gods and mortals, upholding the delicate balance of cosmic law. While his rulings could be harsh, Even his fellow gods, they were always driven by a sense of fairness and the necessity of maintaining harmony in the world. His role as a god of justice set him apart from other gods, as his interventions were often seen as a necessary mechanism for preventing chaos and ensuring that moral order prevailed. Justice, in ancient Greece, was a central concept that influenced not only the divine, but also the mortal realm. The gods, particularly Zeus, were seen as the ultimate arbiters of this justice. His role in overseeing the moral and legal order of the universe was essential to maintaining the stability of the cosmos. As a god who stood above both gods and mortals, Zeus ensured that divine laws were adhered to and that those who violated these laws, whether they were gods or humans, faced punishment. This gave Zeus a unique role as a protector of justice, though the nature of that justice often meant harsh consequences for those who stepped out of line. One of the most important aspects of Zeus's justice was his enforcement of Xenia, the ancient Greek code of hospitality. Xenia was a sacred law that governed the relationship between guest and host. It was considered a moral imperative that guests were treated with respect and care, and hosts were bound by duty to offer shelter, food, and protection. Violations of Xenia were considered grievous offenses, as they undermined the social fabric of Greek society. Zeus, being the guardian of hospitality, was particularly vigilant in ensuring that this code was upheld. In several myths, Zeus intervened in mortal affairs to punish those who violated Xenia. One of the most famous stories involving Zeus and hospitality is that of Baucis and Philemon, a poor elderly couple who unknowingly hosted Zeus and Hermes in disguise. While the rest of the town had turned the gods away, Baucis and Philemon treated them with kindness and generosity. In gratitude, Zeus spared them from a devastating flood that he sent to punish the inhospitable townspeople. This act of mercy demonstrated Zeus's belief in the importance of justice through kindness and fairness. In contrast, the myth of Lycaon, a king who violated the laws of hospitality, highlights the darker side of Zeus's sense of justice. Lycaon, who was not only rude to Zeus but also attempted to serve him human flesh as part of a meal, incurred the wrath of the king of the gods. As punishment for his impiety and disrespect, Zeus transformed Lycaon into a wolf. This transformation was not just a physical punishment, but also a symbolic representation of the loss of humanity and the consequences of violating divine law. The myth of Lycaon emphasizes Zeus's power to enforce justice, even when it involved the most extreme forms of retribution. Zeus's role as the enforcer of justice extended beyond hospitality. He was also the god who ensured that oaths were kept, particularly the sacred oaths sworn by both mortals and gods. Oaths were a significant part of Greek life, as they were thought to carry divine weight and binding power. Swearing false oaths or breaking an oath was a serious crime that could invite the wrath of the gods. Zeus, as the god of justice, was frequently called upon to punish those who broke their oaths. One notable example is the myth of perjury and the sacred oath, where Zeus punishes those who dishonor their oaths. In this context, Zeus's role was not merely to punish, but to remind both gods and humans of the importance of their word and the sacredness of promises made before the gods. His judgment ensured that the divine and human worlds remained connected by the rule of law and moral order. The concept of justice in Greek mythology was also tied to the idea of Nemesis, the god of retribution, who often worked in tandem with Zeus. Nemesis, as a personification of vengeance, was responsible for ensuring that those who had wronged others would be made to pay for their deeds. In many myths, Zeus and Nemesis collaborated to ensure that balance was restored in the world. For example, when mortals or gods became too arrogant or prideful, it was Zeus's task to bring them down, often with Nemesis acting as the agent of punishment. The downfall of Narcissus, the beautiful youth who fell in love with his own reflection, is one such example. Narcissus's excessive pride and self-love were punished by Nemesis, who let him fall in love with his own image, ultimately leading to his tragic death. This myth underscores Zeus's belief in the importance of humility and moderation, two qualities that were central to his sense of justice. Another prominent aspect of Zeus's justice was his role in overseeing the Fates, the three sisters who control the destiny of all living beings. The Fates, Clotho, Lachesis, and Atropos, were responsible for spinning, measuring, and cutting the thread of life. While Zeus was not directly in charge of the Fates, he often had to act in accordance with their decisions. However, he did have some authority over their workings. In certain instances, Zeus intervened in the lives of mortals to alter their fates, particularly if their destiny seemed unjust or their deaths premature. One such example is the myth of Hercules, where Zeus intervened to grant the hero immortality after his death. Though the fates had decreed that Hercules must die, Zeus defied this fate in recognition of Hercules' trials and suffering, allowing him to join the gods on Mount Olympus. Zeus's justice also extended to punishing those who committed hubris or excessive pride, which was one of the most severe offenses in Greek mythology. Hubris was viewed as a direct challenge to the gods, and those who engaged in it were often punished severely. In the myth of Arachne, a mortal woman who challenged Athena to a weaving contest and insulted the gods, her arrogance resulted in her transformation into a spider. Zeus, though not directly involved in the punishment, represented the broader divine order that demanded respect and humility from mortals. The punishment of Arachne highlighted the dire consequences of disregarding the god's authority. Moreover, Zeus's justice extended beyond his immediate circle of Olympian gods to the mortal world, where he was seen as the ultimate judge in matters of law and order. As a ruler of both the divine and mortal realms, Zeus was believed to oversee the moral actions of individuals and nations. In several myths, Zeus's judgment was instrumental in ensuring that justice was served in mortal conflicts. One of the most significant stories illustrating Zeus's role as a moral judge is the tale of the Judgment of Paris, where the Prince of Troy was tasked with choosing the fairest of three goddesses, Hera, Athena, and Aphrodite. Each goddess offered him a bribe, and Paris ultimately chose Aphrodite, setting off a chain of events that led to the Trojan War. Zeus, though he did not directly intervene in Paris' choice, played a central role in the unfolding of events, as his decision to allow Paris to make the judgment led to moral consequences that followed. In another instance, Zeus was responsible for the destruction of the city of Sodom and Gomorrah, which, according to Greek mythology, was known for its extreme depravity and immorality. The gods decided to wipe out the cities as a divine punishment for the sins of the inhabitants. Only Lot and his family were spared, as they adhered to the laws of hospitality and virtue. This story of divine retribution reinforced Zeus's role as a protector of moral law and cosmic order, demonstrating that the gods were not merely distant figures of power, but active participants in the moral governance of the world. Zeus's sense of justice was also deeply intertwined with the Greek concept of eusebia, or piety, which emphasized respect for the gods and adherence to divine law. Those who failed to show proper reverence to the gods were often met with Zeus's wrath. The punishment of King Hades and King Minos, who violated the sacred laws of Zeus, are other examples of how Zeus's justice was not only about maintaining cosmic order, but also about reinforcing moral behavior and respect for divine authority. In conclusion, Zeus's role as the god of justice was multifaceted and integral to the maintenance of order in both the divine and mortal worlds. His decisions, while sometimes harsh, were always intended to ensure balance, fairness, and respect for divine law. Through his actions, Zeus exemplified the importance of justice in maintaining the harmony of the cosmos, whether through upholding the sacred laws of hospitality, punishing those guilty of hubris, or overseeing the actions of the fates. Zeus's role as the enforcer of divine justice was central to the ancient Greek worldview and to mythology that has inspired countless generations. Zeus, as the king of the gods, played a central role in the realm of prophecy and fate in Greek mythology. Prophecy, the divine knowledge of future events, was a powerful and mysterious force in the ancient world. While many gods, oracles, and seers could foretell future occurrences, Zeus stood at the heart of the prophecy, often the one who determined the ultimate course of events. His connection to prophecy was not just one of foreknowledge, but of active involvement in the fate of both gods and mortals. The concept of fate, governed by the moire fates, was central to the Greek understanding of life, and Zeus's role in shaping and altering this fate created a deep relationship between the gods and the world of mortal destiny. Prophecy was integral to the actions and beliefs of both mortals and gods. Throughout Greek mythology, characters often sought divine insight into the future, seeking to understand their destiny or avoid calamity. Yet, in a world governed by the fates, prophecy often revealed that attempting to escape one's fate was futile. The gods, including Zeus, could sometimes intervene in the unfolding of prophecy, but more often than not, their actions only brought about the inevitable conclusion that had been foretold. This paradox, The tension between knowing one's fate and the inability to avoid it was a constant theme in Greek mythology. One of the most famous aspects of Zeus's relationship with prophecy lies in his connection to Apollo, the god of prophecy and oracles. Apollo, who was born of Zeus and the Titaness Leto, was a god who spoke the prophecies of the future, particularly through his sacred temple at Delphi. The Oracle of Delphi was considered the most important and powerful of all oracles in the ancient world. Pilgrims from across the Greek world would travel to Delphi to seek Apollo's guidance, and his responses were often cryptic, offering a glimpse into the future but never a clear path. Though Apollo was the one who communicated divine prophecy, it was ultimately Zeus who controlled and directed the flow of fate, for even Apollo's visions were subject to Zeus's will. The most iconic example of prophecy in Greek mythology is the story of Oedipus. Oedipus, the king of Thebes, was cursed by the gods with a terrible prophecy. He would one day kill his father and marry his mother. This prophecy was delivered by the Oracle of Delphi, which was under the authority of Zeus, through Apollo. The prophecy devastated Oedipus's parents, Laius and Jocasta, who took extreme measures to prevent it from coming true. Laius had his son abandoned in the wilderness, hoping to avoid the fulfillment of the curse. However, fate, as determined by Zeus, could not be avoided. Oedipus was saved and raised by another royal family, unaware of his true parentage. As he grew older, Oedipus unknowingly killed his father, Laius, and later married his mother, Jocasta, fulfilling the prophecy that had been foretold. This tragic story exemplifies the paradox of prophecy in Greek mythology. While individuals may try to change their fate, the gods and prophecies have already decreed a certain outcome. Another significant myth where Zeus plays a role in prophecy is the story of Achilles. Achilles, the greatest hero of the Trojan War, was the son of Zeus and the mortal Thetis, a sea nymph. Before Achilles was born, his mother learned from the gods that her son would either live a long and uneventful life or a short but glorious one. The prophecy stated that Achilles' death would come at Troy, and that his fate would be sealed by an arrow to the heart. While Thetis tried to protect her son from this fate, dipping him in a river Styx to make him nearly invulnerable, his destiny, as governed by Zeus and the Fates, could not be escaped. Achilles' story demonstrates the inevitability of fate, as no matter how powerful or divine one might be, they are still subject to the forces of destiny and prophecy. Despite his attempt to avoid it, Achilles met a foretold end in the Trojan War, struck down by the arrow of Paris, guided by the god Apollo. Zeus himself was not immune to prophecy, and his own future and actions were often influenced by the oracles and predictions of the gods. One of the most important prophecies concerning Zeus was a prophecy about the fall of the Titans. In the Titanomachy, the great battle between the Olympian gods and the Titans, it was foretold that one of the Titans would bear a child who would overthrow the current ruler of the universe. For this reason, Cronus, the leader of the Titans and Zeus's father, swallowed all of his children at birth to prevent the prophecy from coming true. However, Zeus, who was saved by his mother Rhea, ultimately fulfilled the prophecy by defeating Cronus and the Titans, taking his place as the king of the gods. This cycle of prophecy, both the fear of its fulfillment and its inevitable execution, was central to the Greek worldview, where the will of the gods could not be avoided. Zeus's connection to prophecy also extends to his role in the Trojan War, a conflict that was heavily influenced by both divine prophecy and mortal decisions. According to prophecy, Paris, a prince of Troy, would cause the destruction of Troy by taking Helen from Menelaus, the king of Sparta. Zeus, through his will and the influence of the fates, allowed the events to unfold as they were prophesied. However, the war itself was influenced by multiple prophecies, particularly those involving the Greek heroes. The most significant prophecy was that Achilles would be the key to the Greeks' victory, but also that his death would lead to their defeat. This foretelling weighed heavily on the minds of the gods and the mortals involved in the war. In the end, the prophecy was fulfilled as Achilles was slain and Troy fell. While the gods had intervened in mortal affairs, they could not alter the course of the prophecy, which continued to play out despite their actions. Zeus's role in controlling or altering prophecies was not always straightforward. Sometimes he acted as the agent of fate, fulfilling prophecies even if they led to suffering and destruction. In other instances, he sought to modify or delay prophecies in order to serve a larger cosmic purpose. An example of this occurs in the myth of Atreus and Thyestes, where the two brothers, driven by a curse on their family, repeatedly defied the will of the gods. The prophecies surrounding their family were tragic, leading to infighting, murder, and betrayal. Despite the interference of Zeus and the gods, the tragic fate of Atreus' house was carried out, demonstrating that even divine intervention cannot always change what is decreed by prophecy. Zeus's control over prophecy also meant that he could shape the destinies of heroes and mortals in subtle ways. For example, in the myth of Jason and the Argonauts, Jason's quest for the Golden Fleece was a journey that was guided by the prophecies of the gods. The fleece, which was said to bring great power, could only be obtained through fulfillment of a divine plan, and Jason's path was laid out by the oracles and the will of Zeus. Zeus's interventions in Jason's journey were not always direct, but his decisions influenced the events that led to Jason's ultimate success and failure. The concept of prophecy in the Argonaut story reflected the idea that even the greatest heroes were not free from the constraints of fate. The role of prophecy in Greek mythology also highlights the ways in which mortal beings responded to the will of the gods. Prophecies often served as a way for gods like Zeus to communicate their will to humans, guiding them towards certain actions. While some mortals sought to avoid their prophesied fate, others embraced their destiny, seeing the prophecy as a challenge to overcome or a goal to achieve. This tension between fate and free will was a key theme in many Greek myths, and it reflected the Greek belief that while the gods could guide and influence events, it was ultimately the choices of mortals that determined their fates. In conclusion, Zeus's role in prophecy was one of immense importance, as it will often govern the course of both divine and mortal destinies. His interactions with the oracles, prophecies, and the fates revealed the complex relationship between free will and predestination in Greek mythology. While Zeus was the ultimate power in the divine realm, he, like all beings, was subject to the overarching power of fate, which no god or mortal could fully escape. The stories of Oedipus, Achilles, and the Trojan War, among others, illustrate the inevitable intersection of prophecy, fate, and the actions of both gods and mortals. These myths reinforce the Greek belief that, no matter how powerful or wise one might be, the forces of destiny, guided by Zeus, ultimately control the course of life and death. Zeus's power extended far beyond the human realm and the politics of the gods. As the ruler of the heavens, he was deeply connected to the natural world and the forces of nature, which he controlled with supreme authority. The elements, thunder, lightning, rain, and wind, were all under his dominion, and his control over these forces played a significant role in both the lives of mortals and the larger cosmic order. Through his mastery of nature, Zeus not only maintained balance in the universe, but also demonstrated the power and unpredictability of the divine. His control over the elements made him a formidable figure in Greek mythology, and many of his most dramatic actions involved his manipulation of nature. The most iconic symbol of Zeus's power over nature was a thunderbolt, which became his trademark weapon. The thunderbolt was both a physical and symbolic manifestation of Zeus's authority and dominion over the skies. It was the ultimate instrument of his wrath, a weapon that could bring destruction to both gods and mortals alike. The thunderbolt represented the uncontrollable and awe-inspiring forces of nature, capable of bringing both life and death. In many myths, Zeus's thunderbolt was used to punish those who defied him or to restore order to a chaotic situation. The mere sight of Zeus wielding his thunderbolt struck fear into the hearts of both mortals and gods, as it was a reminder of the unpredictable and overwhelming power of the natural world. Zeus's control over the weather was also a key aspect of his role as the ruler of the heavens. The skies and the elements were his domain, and he could bring about storms, clear skies, or any form of weather depending on his will. In some myths, Zeus's control over the weather was a reflection of his moods or desires. For example, when Zeus was angry, he could bring violent storms, thunder, and lightning to wreak havoc on the world below. In contrast, when he was pleased, he could bring gentle rains to nourish the earth and clear skies to offer warmth and light. His manipulation of the weather reflected the ancient Greek belief that the gods were deeply intertwined with the natural world, and that their emotions and actions had direct consequences for the environment. In many ways, Zeus's control over the elements was not just about power, but also about balance. The Greeks understood that the forces of nature could be both beneficial and destructive. Rain could bring crops to life, but it could also flood the land. Wind could carry ships across the seas, but but it could also cause storms that sank them. Zeus, as the master of the skies, was the guardian of this balance. He ensured that the elements, while powerful, were kept in harmony with each other. This sense of balance was central to Zeus's role as the keeper of cosmic order. His actions, whether they involved the weather or other natural phenomena, were aimed at maintaining equilibrium in the universe. The myth of Deucalion and Hera, often considered the Greek equivalent of the story of Noah's Ark, offers a clear example of Zeus's use of nature to restore balance. In this myth, Zeus decided to destroy humanity with a great flood due to their moral decay. He unleashed torrential rains, and the world was submerged in water. However, Zeus spared the righteous couple, Deucalion and Hera, who were instructed by the god Prometheus to build an ark and survive the flood. After the waters receded, Zeus allowed the couple to repopulate the earth by throwing stones over their shoulders, which transformed into human beings. This story reflects Zeus's role as both a creator and a destroyer. The flood was a divine punishment, but it was also a means of renewing the world and restoring moral order. By controlling the elements, Zeus was able to both punish and purify the earth, ensuring that life could continue in a more balanced form. Zeus's control over the weather was also deeply tied to his role as the god of agriculture and fertility. In many myths, Zeus's rains were seen as blessings that allowed crops to grow, while his thunder could bring the much-needed lightning to stimulate growth. The ancient Greeks believed that Zeus was the source of all natural abundance, and that his moods directly influenced the fertility of the land. This connection between Zeus and agricultural life is especially evident in the myth of Demeter and Persephone. Demeter, the goddess of the harvest, was the one who controlled the earth's fertility, but she relied on Zeus's gift of rain and sunshine to ensure that the crops grew. The relationship between Zeus, Demeter, and Persephone symbolized the interconnectedness of the gods and nature. When Persephone was taken to the underworld by Hades, Demeter caused a famine on earth, as she withheld her blessings until her daughter was returned. During this time, Zeus intervened, allowing for a compromise between Demeter and Hades, ensuring that Persephone would spend part of the year with her mother and part with her husband. This myth reinforced the idea that Zeus, as the ruler of the skies, was integral to the prosperity of the earth and the cycles of nature. Zeus's command over the winds was another significant aspect of his control over the elements. In Greek mythology, the Anemoi were the gods of the winds, each representing a different directional wind. The most famous of these was Boreas, the god of the north wind, who was associated with cold, winter winds. While the Anemoi were powerful deities in their own right, Zeus, as the ruler of the heavens, had ultimate control over their actions. In several myths, Zeus used the winds to either aid or hinder mortals. For instance, in the myth of Odysseus, Zeus commanded the winds to blow Odysseus off course, leading to the hero's prolonged journey home. The winds played a pivotal role in the epic, and Zeus's control over them demonstrated his power to shape the destinies of mortals through the natural world. Zeus's manipulation of the weather and natural elements was not always just an act of divine will. It also served as a reflection of his role as the enforcer of justice. When mortals or gods violated the divine laws, Zeus often responded by unleashing natural disasters. For example, when the city of Lydia was ruled by the tyrant king Gyges, Zeus punished the kingdom with a terrible storm after Gyges' rule became corrupt and unjust. The storm destroyed the city, and the message was clear. No mortal ruler, no matter how powerful, could escape the consequences of defying the cosmic order. This idea of divine retribution, mediated to the elements, was central to Greek understanding of the gods' role in the world. Zeus's manipulation of the weather was not just an act of wrath, but a demonstration of his responsibility to uphold order and justice in both the mortal and divine realms. Zeus's power over nature also allowed him to intervene in the lives of mortals in more subtle ways. The natural world, with all of its beauty and danger, was seen as a reflection of Zeus's will. His ability to control the elements made him a god who could either nurture or destroy, and this duality was a central part of his character. Whether through the blessing of rain or the fury of a thunderstorm, Zeus's power over nature reflected the ever-changing and unpredictable nature of the cosmos itself. The gods, particularly Zeus, were not seen as distant and indifferent beings, but as active participants in the daily lives of mortals. Their control over the elements reminded mortals of their place in the world and the power of the divine. Zeus's relationship with nature was also symbolic of his role as the guarantor of order and stability in the universe. In Greek mythology, the gods were often associated with different aspects of nature: Athena with wisdom and olive trees, Artemis with the hunt and the wild, Poseidon with the seas, and Demeter with the harvest. Zeus, as the god of the skies, was the one who controlled the overarching balance between these forces. Through his manipulation of the weather, his command over the winds, and his use of natural disasters as a tool for justice, Zeus ensured that the natural world remained in balance. His power was not absolute in the sense that he could control every aspect of nature, but he was a force that brought harmony and regulation to the forces of the earth and the heavens. In conclusion, Zeus's control over the elements was a key aspect of his role as the king of the gods. His ability to command the weather, the winds, and the natural forces allowed him to shape the course of mortal events and maintain cosmic order. Through his use of natural phenomena, Zeus could both nurture life and bring about destruction, symbolizing the delicate balance between creation and destruction in the world. His mastery over the elements reinforced his position as the ruler of the universe and demonstrated the deep connection between the gods and the natural world. Whether through the calming rain, the destructive thunderstorm, or the guiding winds, Zeus's power over nature was a central theme in Greek mythology, embodying both the beauty and the terror of the divine forces that shaped the world. As the king of the gods, Zeus's influence extended far beyond the Olympian realm, deeply affecting the lives of mortals. While he was a figure of immense power and authority in the divine world, Zeus was also deeply intertwined with the fate of humans. He played an active role in guiding, protecting, and punishing humanity, balancing his responsibilities as a god of justice, order, and protection. Mortals were often caught between the whim of the gods and their own desires, but Zeus, as the overseer of cosmic balance, was frequently called upon to intervene in their affairs, whether to offer assistance, mete out punishment, or guide them through their trials. His role in mortal affairs exemplified the belief that the gods were not distant or detached from human existence, but active participants in shaping the course of mortal lives. One of Zeus's primary roles in mortal affairs was as a protector of justice and order. In Greek mythology, justice was not a passive concept, but an active force that required enforcement. Zeus, as the god of justice, was often depicted as the guardian of moral law. He ensured that mortals adhered to principles of right and wrong, punishing those who broke the laws and rewarding those who upheld them. His intervention in mortal affairs often served as a reminder that the gods were watching and that humans could not escape the consequences of their actions. The myth of Zeus and Lycaon is one of the clearest examples of his role in maintaining justice among mortals. Lycaon, a king in Arcadia, was notorious for his cruelty and impiety. He not only defied Zeus's authority, but also committed the grave offense of serving human flesh to the god, testing his divinity. In response, Zeus unleashed his wrath upon Lycaon, transforming him into a wolf and sending a devastating flood to cleanse the earth of his tyranny. This story emphasized the idea that Zeus, as a protector of moral order, could not allow such impiety and injustice to go unpunished. It also illustrated his ability to intervene directly in mortal affairs, using divine power to restore balance and ensure that evil actions were met with fitting consequences. Zeus's role as protector of justice extended to his interventions in matters of war. In several myths, Zeus was called upon to oversee the outcome of battles, not just for the sake of mortals, but also to maintain a cosmic balance. One of the most famous examples of Zeus's involvement in war is the Trojan War, a conflict that was heavily influenced by divine prophecy and the will of the gods. While the gods, including Zeus, took sides in the war, it was ultimately Zeus who held the final say in determining the outcome. His involvement was not as a direct participant in the fighting, but rather as a mediator who could shift the tides of battle through his will. When the gods took sides, Zeus was often the one to restore equilibrium, ensuring that neither side gained an unfair advantage. At the same time, he played a pivotal role in the fate of mortal heroes, such as Hercules, whose death was prophesied long before the war began.